There's something profound that happens when we truly understand limiting beliefs. Not the surface level understanding most people have, but the deeper truth that changes everything. What I'm about to share might feel uncomfortable at first, then liberating, and finally, transformative. Most people think limiting beliefs are just negative thoughts they need to replace with positive ones. They try to argue with their inner critic, to override their doubts with affirmations, to push through their resistance with willpower. But this approach is like trying to uproot a tree by pulling out its branches while the roots remain buried deep underground, spreading and strengthening in the darkness. The real secret to letting go of limiting beliefs isn't about fighting them or fixing them. It's about understanding their true nature so completely that they lose their power over you. It's about discovering that what you've been calling limiting beliefs are actually something far more interesting and workable than you ever imagined. By the end of our time together, you'll understand why your limiting beliefs have been so persistent, why conventional approaches haven't worked, and most importantly, how to relate to these mental patterns in a way that naturally dissolves their hold on your life. This isn't about becoming someone who never has doubts or fears. It's about becoming someone who isn't controlled by them. Have you noticed how the harder you try to let go of limiting beliefs, the more stubborn they seem to become? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on the content of our beliefs rather than understanding what beliefs actually are. Picture this. You wake up one morning determined to finally overcome your belief that you're not good enough. You look in the mirror and start repeating positive affirmations. I am worthy. I am capable. I am enough. But even as you speak these words, there's a voice in the back of your mind whispering, "Who are you kidding?" The more forcefully you try to convince yourself, the louder that whisper becomes until you're locked in an exhausting internal battle between what you want to believe and what you actually believe. You've probably tried journaling about your beliefs, analyzing where they came from, understanding their origins in childhood or past experiences. Maybe you've even had breakthrough moments where you clearly saw how irrational a particular belief was. Yet somehow, despite all this insight and effort, the belief continues to influence your choices, your feelings, and your perception of what's possible for your life. This is where most people get frustrated and conclude that their limiting beliefs are just too deeply ingrained to change. They might seek out more powerful techniques, more intensive therapy, or more dramatic interventions. But the real issue isn't that their beliefs are too strong, it's that they're approaching the whole process from a fundamental misunderstanding of what beliefs actually are. Here's what most people don't realize. Beliefs aren't things you have, they're things you do. They're not static objects stored somewhere in your mind like files in a cabinet. They're active processes, ongoing interpretations, living patterns of attention and meaning-making that you're constantly recreating moment by moment. Think about a river that seems solid and permanent from a distance. But when you look closely, you see it's nothing but water in constant motion. The river appears to be a thing, but it's actually a process. Your beliefs are like that river. They seem solid and unchanging, but they're actually fluid patterns that you're maintaining through repetition and attention. This changes everything about how you approach letting go of limiting beliefs. Instead of trying to dig out deeply rooted mental objects, you're learning to recognize and interrupt the ongoing process by which you create these patterns. Instead of fighting against fixed structures, you're working with dynamic processes that are far more flexible than they appear. When you understand this, you begin to see that your limiting beliefs aren't your enemies to be defeated. They're habits of thinking that you've innocently learned to maintain. They're not character flaws or permanent features of your personality. They're simply patterns that made sense at some point in your life and have continued through momentum and repetition. This understanding naturally brings compassion to the process. You're not broken for having limiting beliefs, and you don't need to be fixed. You simply need to understand how you've been unknowingly maintaining patterns that no longer serve you and learn how to let them dissolve through lack of reinforcement rather than through force. Let me tell you about a young woman who traveled to a remote mountain village to study with a wise teacher known for helping people transform their deepest mental patterns. She arrived carrying a heavy burden of beliefs about her inadequacy, her unworthiness, and her inability to create the life she wanted. On her first day, the teacher handed her a large clay pot and asked her to fill it with water from the village well. The pot was cracked and leaked constantly, but the teacher insisted she carry it back and forth all day, refilling it each time it emptied. By evening, she was exhausted and frustrated. "This is pointless," she complained. "No matter how many times I fill this pot, the water always leaks out. It's broken beyond repair." The teacher smiled gently. "Tell me, what did you learn about the pot today?" "That it's useless," she replied bitterly. "The cracks make it impossible to hold water." "And yet," the teacher observed, "you were able to bring water to the garden, to the kitchen, to the animals. The pot served its purpose perfectly." The young woman looked confused. "But it couldn't hold the water." "Exactly," the teacher nodded. "The pot's job was never to hold water. It was to transport water. The cracks didn't make it broken, they made it flow." Over the following weeks, the teacher continued to work with her understanding. One day, he asked her to observe her thoughts without trying to change them. Notice how they arise, how they flow, how they pass away. Don't try to catch them or keep them or push them away. Just watch. As she practiced this observation, something remarkable began to happen. She started to see that her limiting beliefs weren't solid, permanent fixtures in her mind. They were more like clouds passing through the sky of her awareness, arising, changing, dissolving, reforming. Some were dense and dark, others were wispy and transparent. But none of them were as solid or permanent as they had seemed. "The mind is like sky," the teacher explained. "The sky is not disturbed by the clouds that pass through it. Storms may rage, but the sky remains vast and open. Your beliefs are like weather patterns in the sky of your consciousness. They arise and pass away, but they are not who you are." This woman learned something profound about the nature of mental patterns. She discovered that trying to fight her limiting beliefs was like trying to clear the sky by pushing clouds away with her hands. Instead, she learned to rest in the spacious awareness that wasn't touched by whatever thoughts or beliefs happened to be present. The teacher's final lesson was the most important. "The goal isn't to have a mind free of clouds," he told her. "The goal is to remember that you are the sky, not the weather." This story reveals the essential wisdom about working with limiting beliefs. They're not solid obstacles to be removed, but flowing patterns to be understood. They're not enemies to be defeated, but natural phenomena to be witnessed with compassion and wisdom. And most importantly, they're not who you are. They're simply weather patterns in the vast sky of your true nature. Here's what transforms everything about letting go of limiting beliefs. The beliefs themselves aren't the problem. Your relationship to them is. Most people approach limiting beliefs like they're trying to perform surgery on themselves, carefully cutting out the offending thoughts and replacing them with healthier ones. But this approach is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. You're not trying to curate the perfect collection of beliefs. You're learning to relate to all beliefs, regardless of their content, from a place of freedom rather than identification. Let me tell you about Sarah, a talented artist who had convinced herself she wasn't creative enough to make a living from her art. For years, she tried every technique she could find to change this belief. She wrote affirmations, did visualization exercises, studied the lives of successful artists, and even worked with therapists to understand where this belief had originated. Despite all these efforts, the belief persisted. Every time she considered pursuing art professionally, the familiar voice would arise. "You're not good enough. Other artists are more talented. You'll never make it." She became increasingly frustrated, not just with the belief itself, but with her inability to change it, despite all her effort and insight. Then one day, something shifted. Instead of trying to argue with the voice or replace it with positive thoughts, she simply noticed it with curiosity. "Oh, there's that thought again. She observed, almost with affection, "Hello, familiar voice. I see you're trying to protect me from disappointment and rejection." This simple shift in how she related to the belief changed everything. Instead of seeing it as the voice of truth about her limitations, she began to see it as one perspective among many, and not necessarily the most accurate or helpful one. Instead of fighting against it, she learned to acknowledge it without being controlled by it. What happened next surprised her. When she stopped giving the belief so much power through resistance and reaction, it began to lose its grip on her naturally. It was still there sometimes, but it no longer felt like an insurmountable wall blocking her path. It was more like a cautious friend offering unwanted advice, something she could hear and consider without feeling compelled to obey. This reveals the deeper truth about limiting beliefs. They persist not because they're true or because they're deeply rooted, but because of how much attention and energy we give them through our attempts to fight them. The very act of struggling against a belief reinforces its apparent reality and importance. When you fight against the limiting belief, you're unconsciously agreeing with the premise that it has power over you. You're treating it as though it's a real obstacle rather than a mental pattern. This resistance actually feeds the belief, giving it energy and strengthening its hold on your consciousness. But when you learn to observe beliefs with the same detached interest, you might watch clouds or listen to background noise. Something remarkable happens. Without the fuel of your resistance and reaction, they begin to lose their compelling quality. They're still there sometimes, but they no longer feel like commands you must obey or truths you must accept. This isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about recognizing that thoughts and beliefs are mental events, not reality itself. They're interpretations, not facts. They're one lens through which you can view your experience, but they're not the only lens, and they're certainly not the most accurate lens. The revolutionary insight is this: you don't need to have the right beliefs to live an unlimited life. You just need to stop being controlled by beliefs, regardless of their content. When you understand that beliefs are tools for navigating reality rather than descriptions of reality, you become free to use them when they're helpful and set them aside when they're not. This freedom doesn't come from replacing limiting beliefs with empowering ones. It comes from developing a mature, spacious relationship with the entire phenomenon of believing. You learn to hold all beliefs lightly, to use them as working hypotheses rather than absolute truths, and to remain open to possibilities that transcend whatever you currently believe. Foundation 1. Awareness. The first foundation for letting go of limiting beliefs is developing the capacity to observe your thoughts and beliefs without immediately becoming identified with them. This isn't about analyzing or evaluating your beliefs. It's about learning to witness them with the same detached clarity you might observe objects in a museum. Most people are so fused with their thoughts that they don't distinguish between having a thought and being that thought. When the thought, "I'm not smart enough," arises, they don't experience it as, "I'm having the thought that I'm not smart enough." They experience it as a direct statement about reality. This fusion makes the thought seem more real and more powerful than it actually is. The practice of awareness begins with learning to create space between yourself and your mental content. This happens naturally when you start paying attention to the process of thinking rather than just the content of thoughts. Notice how thoughts arise, how they change, how they fade away. Observe the gaps between thoughts, the silence that thoughts emerge from and return to. This awareness isn't something you force or create through effort. It's more like tuning into something that's already present, the consciousness that's always witnessing your mental activity. When you rest in this witnessing awareness, beliefs lose their commanding presence and become simply another phenomena arising and passing away in the field of your experience. Practice this awareness throughout your day. When you notice a limiting belief arising, instead of immediately trying to change it or analyze it, simply acknowledge its presence. "I notice I'm having the thought that I'm not capable of this." This simple recognition creates space and begins to loosen the belief's grip on your consciousness. Foundation 2. Investigation. The second foundation involves investigating your beliefs with genuine curiosity rather than trying to prove them right or wrong. This investigation isn't about gathering evidence to support or refute your beliefs. It's about understanding how beliefs function in your experience and recognizing their constructed nature. When a limiting belief arises, you can explore it through gentle inquiry. Where do you feel this belief in your body? What emotions accompany it? What images or memories surface? How does this belief affect your behavior and choices? What would be different if you didn't have this belief? This investigation isn't intellectual analysis, it's experiential exploration. You're not trying to figure out whether the belief is true or false. You're becoming intimately familiar with how it operates in your lived experience. This familiarity naturally reduces the belief's power because you begin to see it as a construction rather than a reality. One particularly powerful aspect of investigation is exploring the opposite of your limiting belief. If you believe, "I'm not creative," spend time genuinely considering the possibility that you are creative. What evidence might support this alternative view? How might your life be different if you operated from this perspective? This isn't about convincing yourself of anything. It's about loosening the grip of any single perspective. The goal of investigation is not to reach conclusions, but to develop flexibility of mind. When you can hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, when you can see the constructed nature of all beliefs, you become less attached to any particular belief and more available to respond freshly to whatever situation you're facing. Foundation 3. Compassion. The third foundation recognizes that limiting beliefs usually developed as protective mechanisms. They weren't created to hurt you, they were created to help you navigate difficult or threatening situations. Understanding this brings compassion to the process of letting go. Many limiting beliefs formed during childhood, when you had limited resources and needed to adapt to challenging circumstances. A belief like, "I have to be perfect to be loved," might have helped you gain approval from critical parents. A belief like, "I can't trust anyone," might have protected you from being hurt in an unpredictable environment. These beliefs served important functions at the time they developed. The problem isn't that you created them. The problem is that you've outgrown them, but haven't yet recognized that they're no longer necessary. It's like continuing to wear clothes that fit you as a child. They served their purpose then, but they're constraining you now. When you approach limiting beliefs with this understanding, you can appreciate them for the protection they once provided while recognizing that it's time to let them go. This compassionate approach prevents the self-criticism and internal warfare that often accompanies attempts to change beliefs. Compassion also extends to the part of you that created and maintained these beliefs. Instead of seeing yourself as flawed for having limiting beliefs, you can appreciate the intelligence and creativity that went into developing survival strategies during challenging times. This self-compassion creates the safety necessary for deep transformation. Foundation 4. Integration. The fourth foundation involves integrating the insights and freedom that emerge from the first three foundations into your daily life. This isn't about maintaining a perfect state of consciousness, but about developing the skill to work with beliefs as they arise in real-time situations. Integration means learning to pause when you notice a limiting belief influencing your choices. Instead of automatically accepting the belief as truth or automatically rejecting it as false, you create space to consider, is this belief serving me in this situation? What other perspectives are available? How do I want to respond? This foundation also involves developing new patterns of thought and action that align with your expanded understanding. As you become less controlled by limiting beliefs, you naturally begin to make choices based on your deeper wisdom, your authentic values, and your genuine desires, rather than on old protective strategies. Integration is an ongoing process rather than a destination. You'll continue to encounter limiting beliefs throughout your life, but your relationship to them will be fundamentally different. Instead of being controlled by them, you'll be able to work with them skillfully, extracting whatever wisdom they might contain while not being constrained by their limitations. The goal isn't to reach a state where you never have limiting thoughts or beliefs. The goal is to develop the flexibility and freedom to respond to all mental content from a place of choice rather than compulsion, wisdom rather than reactivity, and love rather than fear. Now that you understand the foundations, let's explore how to apply these principles in your daily life. The key is to remember that this is a practice, not a technique. You're developing a new way of relating to your mental content that will deepen and mature over time.
Daily practices. Morning awareness practice. Begin each day with 5 minutes of simply observing your thoughts without judgment. Notice what beliefs about the day ahead are already active in your mind. Are you anticipating challenges based on limiting beliefs about your capabilities? Are you making assumptions about what's possible based on past experiences? Simply observe without trying to change anything. Belief questioning. Throughout the day, when you notice yourself hesitating or feeling stuck, pause and ask, what am I believing right now that might be influencing this experience? Often, you'll discover that a limiting belief is operating beneath the surface of your awareness, subtly shaping your perception of what's possible. Evening reflection. Before sleep, review the day with curiosity. When did limiting beliefs influence your choices? How did you relate to them? What did you learn about the nature of beliefs through your direct experience? This reflection isn't about judging your performance, but about deepening your understanding. Working with specific beliefs. When a particular limiting belief is especially persistent or problematic, you can work with it more directly using the 4 foundations. Awareness phase. Spend time simply observing this belief when it arises. Notice its texture, its intensity, its effects on your body and emotions. Become intimately familiar with how it operates in your experience without trying to change it. Investigation phase. Explore this belief with genuine curiosity. Where did it come from? How has it served you? What would be different if you didn't have this belief? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? What other perspectives are possible? Compassion phase. Appreciate this belief for whatever protection or guidance it may have provided, understanding its positive intention even if it's no longer serving you. Thank it for trying to help you, while recognizing that you now have other resources available. Integration phase. Experiment with acting as if this belief weren't true. Start small. Choose one situation where you can respond differently than this belief would typically have you respond. Notice what happens when you act from possibility rather than limitation. Advanced practices. As you become more skilled at working with limiting beliefs, you can explore more sophisticated practices. Belief experimentation. Try on different beliefs like clothes, wearing them temporarily to see how they affect your experience. This helps you recognize the constructed nature of all beliefs and develops flexibility in how you relate to them. Perspective taking. When facing a challenge, deliberately consider how someone without your limiting beliefs might approach the situation. What would someone who believed in their capabilities do? What would someone who trusted the process do? This isn't about pretending to be someone else, but about accessing different aspects of your own potential. Meta belief work. Examine your beliefs about beliefs themselves. Do you believe that beliefs are hard to change? Do you believe that some beliefs are more real than others? Working with these meta beliefs can accelerate your overall transformation. Integration challenges. As you practice letting go of limiting beliefs, you may encounter several common challenges. Comfort with limitation. Sometimes limiting beliefs feel safer than unlimited possibility.
Expanding beyond familiar limitations can feel threatening to the part of you that values security and predictability. Recognize this as a natural part of the process and move forward with gentleness and patience. Social pressure. Others in your life may be invested in you maintaining certain limiting beliefs. They might feel threatened by your growth or worried about how your changes will affect them. Remember that you can love others while still choosing to evolve beyond old patterns. Identity attachment. If you've built your identity around certain limitations, letting go of limiting beliefs can feel like losing yourself. Remember that you're not losing who you are, you're discovering who you've always been beneath the constructed limitations. Gradual versus sudden change. Some beliefs dissolve quickly while others release more gradually. Both patterns are normal and appropriate. Trust the natural timing of your transformation rather than trying to force rapid change. As you continue to practice letting go of limiting beliefs, you gradually discover something profound. The most liberated state isn't about having the right beliefs, but about holding all beliefs lightly. You begin to operate from direct experience, intuitive wisdom, and authentic response rather than from mental concepts about what's possible or impossible. This doesn't mean you never use beliefs as tools for navigating life, but you use them consciously, choosing perspectives that serve your highest good while remaining open to changing them when they no longer fit your experience. You become like a skilled craftsperson who uses different tools for different situations, never confusing the tool with the work itself. The natural self. When limiting beliefs no longer constrain your choices, you begin to express what we might call your natural self. The authentic expression of who you are when you're not trying to protect yourself from imagined threats or prove yourself worthy of love and acceptance. This natural self isn't a fixed identity that you need to discover or create. It's more like a dynamic flow of authentic response to whatever life presents. Sometimes it's bold and confident, sometimes it's gentle and receptive, sometimes it's creative and playful, sometimes it's wise and contemplative. It's not limited by beliefs about what kind of person you are or what you're capable of. Living from this natural self feels surprisingly effortless. When you're not constantly battling limiting beliefs or trying to maintain positive beliefs, enormous amounts of energy become available for creative expression, meaningful contribution, and genuine connection. You discover that your authentic nature is far more capable, loving, and wise than any belief system could capture. Ongoing evolution. Letting go of limiting beliefs isn't a destination you reach, but an ongoing process of growth and discovery. As you evolve, new edges will appear, new beliefs will surface, new opportunities for freedom will present themselves. This is natural and healthy. It means you're continuing to expand beyond your current understanding of what's possible.
The key is to approach this ongoing evolution with curiosity and patience rather than urgency and force. Each limiting belief that surfaces is an opportunity to deepen your understanding and expand your freedom. Each moment of recognizing how a belief has been constraining you is a moment of liberation. Remember that this work isn't about perfecting yourself or reaching some ideal state of consciousness. It's about becoming more flexible, more responsive, more authentically yourself. It's about moving through life with greater ease and effectiveness, guided by wisdom rather than driven by unconscious patterns. Contributing to others. One of the beautiful side effects of letting go of limiting beliefs is that you naturally become a source of possibility for others. When people encounter someone who isn't constrained by conventional limitations, it awakens something in them. Your freedom gives others permission to question their own limitations. This isn't about trying to fix or change other people. It's simply about embodying the freedom that becomes available when you're no longer controlled by limiting beliefs. Your authentic expression of possibility becomes a gift to everyone whose life you touch. You might find that people are drawn to you during times when they're ready to question their own beliefs. Without trying to teach or convince anyone, your presence communicates that different ways of being are possible. This is one of the most profound forms of service, helping others remember their own unlimited nature simply by expressing yours. The deeper truth. Ultimately, letting go of limiting beliefs reveals a deeper truth about the nature of human consciousness. You discover that your essential nature is not limited by any belief, no matter how convincing or persistent it might seem. Beliefs are like temporary costumes you wear while playing different roles in the human drama, but they're not who you really are.
This understanding brings tremendous peace and freedom. You realize that you can never be fundamentally damaged by any experience or permanently limited by any belief. Your essential nature remains whole, perfect, and unlimited regardless of what thoughts or beliefs happen to be passing through your awareness. From this perspective, working with limiting beliefs becomes an art rather than a struggle. You learn to dance with them, to work with them skillfully, to appreciate them for what they can teach you while not being constrained by their apparent limitations. You develop what might be called enlightened pragmatism, using beliefs as tools when they're helpful, while never forgetting their constructed nature. This is the ultimate freedom that becomes available through learning to let go of limiting beliefs. Not freedom from having beliefs, but freedom from being controlled by them. Not the absence of mental patterns, but a mature, skillful relationship with all mental patterns. Not the elimination of limitations, but the discovery of your unlimited nature that exists beyond all beliefs about limitation. As you continue on this journey, remember that every moment offers a fresh opportunity to relate to your beliefs with greater wisdom and freedom. Every limiting belief that arises is a doorway to deeper understanding. Every moment of choice is a chance to respond from your authentic nature rather than from inherited patterns. The path of letting go of limiting beliefs is ultimately a path of coming home to yourself. Not the self you think you should be, or the self you've been conditioned to believe you are, but the self you truly are when all artificial limitations are recognized and released. This is the ultimate freedom that becomes available through learning to let go of limiting beliefs. Not freedom from having beliefs, but freedom from being controlled by them. Not the absence of mental patterns, but a mature, skillful relationship with all mental patterns. Not the elimination of limitations, but the discovery of your unlimited nature that exists beyond all beliefs about limitation.